Hey everyone, comment where you're watching from today. This story is about how a simple evening at an upscale Chicago restaurant turned into an unforgettable lesson about respect, power, and quiet dignity. When a police officer decided to flex his authority at the wrong person, he had no idea he was about to face the consequences of his actions in ways he never imagined. The year was 1993, and Chicago was still basking in the glow of their third consecutive NBA championship. The city had transformed into a temple of basketball excellence, with its streets echoing the celebrations of countless victories. Yet on this particular evening, in one of Chicago's most prestigious restaurants, the Golden Fork, the atmosphere was about to shift from sophisticated dining to tense confrontation. The restaurant's interior sparkled with crystal chandeliers, casting warm light across mahogany tables draped in pristine white linens. The soft murmur of conversation mingled with the gentle clink of fine china and sterling silverware. The aroma of expertly prepared cuisine wafted through the air, creating an ambiance of refined luxury that the Golden Fork was famous for. Among the well-heeled diners sat Michael Jordan, dressed casually in a black turtleneck and designer jeans. He wasn't trying to draw attention to himself, just enjoying a quiet dinner with friends after a grueling practice session. The basketball legend had chosen a corner table, seeking some privacy away from the usual fanfare that followed him everywhere. Officer James Reynolds had been working security at the Golden Fork for 3 years, supplementing his police income with this side gig at the upscale establishment. He took pride in maintaining the restaurant's exclusive atmosphere, often going above and beyond to enforce the strict dress code and behavioral standards. Tonight, his attention was fixed on the corner table, where he had spotted what he believed to be a dress code violation. The tension began to build as Reynolds approached the table, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. His face wore the stern expression of someone about to exercise their authority. The other diners, sensing the approaching confrontation, began to quiet their conversations, their eyes drawn to the unfolding scene. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Reynolds announced, his voice carrying across the now hushed restaurant. "We have a strict dress code policy here, and casual attire isn't permitted." The irony of the situation was lost on him. Attempting to remove one of the most recognizable faces in Chicago, perhaps the world, from a restaurant where he was a regular patron. Michael looked up from his meal, his expression calm but slightly puzzled. He had dined here countless times before, often in similar attire. The restaurant's owner had personally assured him that he was always welcome, regardless of the dress code. But instead of immediately revealing his identity or pulling rank, he chose to handle the situation with the same grace he displayed on the court. "Officer," Michael responded quietly, "I understand your concern, but I'm a regular here. Perhaps we could speak with the manager to clear up any misunderstanding." His voice was measured, carrying none of the superiority he could have easily displayed. Reynolds, however, was not in the mood for discussion. "Regular or not, rules are rules. I'm going to have to insist that you leave immediately." His hand rested purposefully on his belt, near his badge, a subtle reminder of his authority. The other diners watched in disbelief, some recognizing the basketball star, others simply uncomfortable with the obvious overreach of power. What happened next would become the talk of Chicago's elite dining circle for years to come. Instead of causing a scene or pulling the celebrity card, Michael simply nodded, placed his napkin on the table, and stood up. His friends began to protest, but he raised a hand to quiet them. As he rose to his full height, several gasps of recognition echoed through the restaurant. Reynolds's expression flickered briefly as the man he'd been attempting to remove towered over him. The realization of who he was dealing with began to dawn on his face, but it was too late. the damage was done. Other diners had already pulled out their phones, some recording, others presumably calling the restaurant's owner. "Thank you for your service, officer," Michael said, his voice carrying just enough weight to make Reynolds shift uncomfortably. "I'll be sure to discuss this situation with the owner tomorrow." There was no threat in his words, no anger, just a simple statement of fact that carried more impact than any confrontation could have. As Michael and his group prepared to leave, the restaurant's atmosphere had transformed completely. The quiet murmur of conversation had been replaced by open discussions about what they were witnessing. Regular patrons knew exactly who he was and what he meant to the city. They had watched him lead their team to multiple championships, had seen him handle pressure with unmatched grace, and now they were watching him deal with disrespect in the same composed manner. The maitre d' came rushing over, profusely apologizing, trying to salvage the situation, but Michael simply smiled, shook his head, and continued toward the exit. He understood something that Reynolds clearly didn't. True power doesn't need to be exercised to be felt. His response to the situation would prove to be far more impactful than any immediate reaction could have been. As he stepped out into the Chicago night, Michael already knew exactly how he would handle this situation. It wouldn't be with angry calls to management or public complaints. No, his response would be much more sophisticated, much more calculated, and ultimately much more memorable. The officer who had tried to exercise his authority would soon learn that sometimes the quietest responses carry the most weight. The story of what happened next would circulate through Chicago's social circles for years to come, a testament to how grace under pressure and strategic thinking can transform a moment of disrespect into an opportunity for teaching a valuable lesson. But that evening, as Michael's car pulled away from the Golden Fork, few could have predicted the series of events that were about to unfold. This incident would become more than just another celebrity restaurant story. It would transform into a masterclass in handling disrespect with dignity and executing revenge with such elegance that it would become legendary. As the saying goes, revenge is a dish best served cold, and Michael Jordan was about to serve it with the same precision. He brought to the basketball court. Have you ever been in a situation where someone misjudged you based on appearances? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories of karma and justice served with style. The morning after the incident at the Golden Fork dawned bright and crisp over Chicago's skyline. Word of the previous night's events had already begun spreading through the city's social circles, carried on the wings of whispers and phone calls. But while others talked, Michael Jordan was already putting his plan into motion. He started his day as usual, arriving early at the Bulls' practice facility. There was no hint of anger or frustration in his demeanor, just the same focused intensity that had become his trademark. But beneath that calm exterior, wheels were turning. He had spent the night thinking about Officer Reynolds' behavior, not just as an insult to himself, but as a symptom of a larger problem. In his office overlooking the practice court, Michael picked up his phone and made a single call. The voice on the other end belonged to Robert Morrison, one of Chicago's most successful real estate developers and a longtime friend. Their conversation was brief, but purposeful. Within hours, property records were being pulled, and meetings were being scheduled. What Officer Reynolds didn't know was that the Golden Fork's building lease was coming up for renewal in just 3 months. The restaurant had been a fixture in Chicago's fine dining scene for over 2 decades, operating from the same prestigious downtown location. Its owner, Gregory Phillips, had always assumed the renewal would be a mere formality. But Michael Jordan hadn't become a legend by being predictable. His quiet revenge began with a series of carefully orchestrated business moves. Through a newly created holding company, he began negotiations to purchase the entire building. The transaction was handled with the same precision he brought to the basketball court. Swift, efficient, and absolutely decisive. While the property acquisition was underway, Michael maintained his usual routine. He was spotted at other high-end restaurants around Chicago, always impeccably dressed, always gracious to staff and fellow diners. His public image remained untarnished, his demeanor unaffected. But those who knew him well recognized the familiar glint in his eye, the same one they'd seen countless times when he was about to execute a game-winning play. 2 weeks after the incident, the building's purchase was complete. The holding company, officially registered as MJ23 Properties, took ownership without fanfare. The Golden Forks management remained unaware of the change in ownership, continuing operations as usual. Officer Reynolds continued his security duties, perhaps thinking the incident had blown over without consequences. But Michael's plan was far from complete. His next move was to arrange a meeting with several of Chicago's most promising young chefs. Among them was Daniel Hayes, a rising star in the culinary world who had trained under some of Europe's most celebrated masters. Hayes had been trying to break into Chicago's competitive restaurant scene for years, looking for the perfect location to launch his innovative concept. The meeting took place in Michael's private office at the United Center. Hayes presented his vision for a modern American restaurant that would honor Chicago's diverse culinary heritage while pushing boundaries and creating new traditions. His passion reminded Michael of his own early days in basketball. That hunger to prove oneself, to create something extraordinary. As Hayes spoke, Michael's smile grew wider. He had found the perfect partner for the next phase of his plan. By the end of the meeting, they had shaken hands on a partnership that would transform Chicago's dining landscape. Hayes would get his dream location, and Michael would get something far more satisfying than simple revenge. 3 months passed quickly. The Golden Forks management finally received notice about their lease renewal, or rather, the lack thereof. The letter was polite, but firm. The new owners had different plans for the space. No negotiations would be entertained. The restaurant, with its decades of history and loyal clientele, would need to vacate the premises within 60 days. The news hit the restaurant staff like a thunderbolt. Gregory Phillips, the Golden Forks owner, tried every connection he had to reverse the decision, but each attempt met the same response. The new owners had a different vision for the property. It wasn't until Phillips finally secured a meeting with the building's new ownership that the full impact of that night's events became clear. Michael walked into the meeting alone, dressed in an impeccable suit that was worlds away from the casual attire that had sparked the incident. Phillips' face drained of color as recognition dawned. The man his security officer had tried to eject was now his building's owner, holding the fate of his restaurant in his hands. "Mr. Phillips," Michael began, his voice carrying the same quiet authority it had that night, "I believe we need to discuss your establishment's approach to customer service." The meeting lasted exactly 15 minutes. By the end, Phillips understood that no amount of pleading would change the outcome. The Golden Forks time at this location was over, but Michael wasn't finished. News of the Golden Forks' impending closure spread quickly through Chicago's restaurant community. Officer Reynolds, still working security at the restaurant, found himself at the center of increasingly uncomfortable conversations. The story of his confrontation with Michael Jordan had become common knowledge, and with it came the realization that his actions had contributed to dozens of people losing their jobs. What happened next showcased the true brilliance of Michael's revenge. As the Golden Fork prepared to close its doors, announcements began circulating about the new restaurant that would take its place. Hayes' concept, backed by Michael's investment, promised to revolutionize Chicago's dining scene. But there was a twist that no one saw coming. Michael ensured that every single employee of the Golden Fork, from the dishwashers to the servers to the cooking staff, received an offer to join the new establishment with increased wages and improved benefits. Every employee except two, Gregory Phillips and Officer Reynolds. The message was clear, but never stated explicitly. Respect and proper treatment of others weren't just good manners, they were good business. The renovation of the space began immediately after the Golden Fork's closure. Michael was often seen on site, consulting with designers and contractors, ensuring every detail aligned with Hayes's vision. The project quickly became one of the most talked about developments in Chicago's restaurant scene, with food critics and social media buzzing about what was to come. During this time, Michael maintained his characteristic grace. When asked about the Golden Fork in interviews, he spoke only of his excitement for the new project and his partnership with Hayes. He never mentioned the incident that had sparked it all, never publicly acknowledged the revenge he was executing. With such precision, the new restaurant, named 23 in a subtle nod to its famous owner, opened 6 months later to rave reviews. Its innovative menu, combining classic Chicago flavors with modern techniques, drew praise from critics and diners alike. The warm, inclusive atmosphere was a stark contrast to the Golden Fork's stuffy exclusivity. The opening night was a star-studded affair, with celebrities, athletes, and Chicago's elite in attendance. Michael made sure to invite several officers from the Chicago Police Department, emphasizing his respect for law enforcement while making it clear that Officer Reynolds' behavior had been an unfortunate exception rather than the rule. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Michael instituted a unique policy at 23. The restaurant would maintain no formal dress code, instead operating on a simple principle. Every guest would be treated with the same respect and dignity, regardless of their attire or appearance. It was a direct response to the incident that had started it all, transformed into a positive change. The success of 23 became a testament to Michael's business acumen and his understanding of true power. He had taken an act of disrespect and transformed it into an opportunity to create something better, something more inclusive, something that would last. The revenge wasn't just in the removal of the Golden Fork, it was in the creation of an establishment that stood for everything its predecessor had failed to embrace. As for Officer Reynolds, he found himself working regular patrol duty. His security contracts at other high-end establishments quietly dried up. The story of his confrontation with Michael Jordan had become a cautionary tale in Chicago's service industry, a reminder that true authority comes not from a badge or a uniform, but from how one treats others. The lesson wasn't lost on anyone who knew the full story. Michael had demonstrated that the best revenge isn't about destruction, it's about creation. He had taken a moment of disrespect and transformed it into an opportunity to build something better, something that would serve as a lasting reminder that every person, regardless of their appearance or attire, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Have you ever witnessed someone turn a negative situation into a positive opportunity? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible true stories of justice served with style. The impact of 23's opening rippled through Chicago's restaurant scene like a stone cast into still water. But while the city buzzed about the new establishment's innovative cuisine and inclusive atmosphere, few knew about the deeper changes taking place behind the scenes. Michael Jordan's revenge wasn't just about replacing one restaurant with another. It was about transforming the entire culture of fine dining in Chicago. As 23 flourished, the Golden Fork's former owner, Gregory Phillips, struggled to secure a new location for his restaurant. Property owners across the city seemed hesitant to lease to him, and prime real estate somehow always ended up unavailable. It wasn't that anyone explicitly rejected him, The timing just never seemed to work out. The invisible hand of Michael's influence stretched far, though he never had to make a single phone call. Officer Reynolds' professional life had taken an equally challenging turn. His reputation in the security industry had become tainted, not through any direct action from Michael, but through the natural spread of the story. Every time he applied for a private security position at an upscale venue, the conversation would inevitably turn to the incident. No one wanted to risk a similar situation at their establishment, but Michael's true masterstroke was yet to reveal itself. Through his connections in the business world, he began quietly acquiring properties in the surrounding blocks. Each purchase was made through different holding companies, keeping his involvement hidden from public view. Within 6 months, he had accumulated a significant portfolio of prime real estate in Chicago's restaurant district. Then came the announcements. One by one, new restaurants began opening in these locations, each backed by Michael's investment group. But these weren't typical high-end establishments. Each restaurant was carefully chosen to represent a different cultural cuisine, led by talented chefs who had struggled to find opportunities in Chicago's traditionally exclusive dining scene. There was Sabor, a vibrant Latin American fusion restaurant headed by chef Isabella Ruiz, whose family recipes had been passed down through generations. Golden Dynasty brought authentic Chinese cuisine to the district, with Chef William Chen introducing dishes that had never been seen in Chicago's fine dining scene. Taste of Africa celebrated the diverse flavors of the African continent under the guidance of Chef Ahmed Hassan. Each restaurant operated under the same principle as 23, no formal dress code, just a commitment to treating every guest with equal respect and dignity. The chefs were given creative freedom and fair compensation, while their staff enjoyed benefits packages that set new standards for the industry. Michael had created not just a restaurant, but a movement. The media began picking up on the story, though not in the way anyone expected. Instead of focusing on the fall of the Golden Fork or Officer Reynolds' mistake, they celebrated the transformation of Chicago's dining scene. Articles praised the innovative approach to fine dining that emphasized inclusion over exclusivity, substance over appearance. The contrast couldn't have been starker. While the Golden Fork had prided itself on keeping people out, these new establishments celebrated welcoming everyone in. The restaurants quickly became known not just for their exceptional food, but for their atmosphere of genuine hospitality. Celebrities could be found dining next to families in casual wear, business executives sharing tables with artists in paint-splattered clothes. Michael's presence in these establishments was subtle but significant. He would often drop by unannounced, sitting at the bar or a corner table, observing how the staff treated every guest. He never had to remind anyone about the importance of respect. The story of what happened to the Golden Fork served as lesson enough. One evening, about 8 months after 23's opening, Officer Reynolds found himself walking past his former workplace. Through the windows, he could see a diverse crowd enjoying their meals. The space transformed from its former stuffiness into something vibrant and alive. As he stood there, Michael happened to be arriving for dinner. Their eyes met briefly. Michael gave a small nod, neither hostile nor friendly, just an acknowledgement. In that moment, Reynolds finally understood the full scope of what his actions had triggered. He had tried to exclude one man from a restaurant, and in response, that man had created an entire restaurant empire dedicated to inclusion. The story might have ended there, but Michael had one more move to make. He announced the creation of the Chicago Hospitality Initiative, a program designed to provide training and opportunities for aspiring restaurant workers from underprivileged backgrounds. The program would offer scholarships for culinary school, apprenticeships at his restaurants, and mentorship from established industry professionals. The initiative's first graduating class included the children of several former Golden Fork employees. These young people, who might never have found opportunities in the traditionally exclusive world of fine dining, were now stepping into careers with real potential for growth. It was the ultimate transformation of a negative situation into a positive force for change. The impact extended beyond Chicago. Restaurant owners in other cities began reconsidering their own policies, recognizing that exclusivity might be costing them more than just potential customers. The story of how Michael Jordan had revolutionized Chicago's dining scene became a case study in business schools, teaching students about the power of responding to discrimination with innovation rather than retaliation. Gregory Phillips eventually opened a new version of the Golden Fork in a suburban location, but it never recaptured its former glory. The world had moved on, and the old model of fine dining, with its rigid dress codes and atmosphere of exclusion, seemed increasingly outdated. Officer Reynolds, for his part, transferred to a different precinct and eventually left law enforcement altogether, the lesson of that night staying with him for the rest of his career. Meanwhile, Michael's restaurant empire continued to grow, but always with the same foundational principles. Each new establishment celebrated a different cuisine, hired staff from diverse backgrounds, and maintained the policy of respect for all guests. The restaurants became known as places where the food was exceptional, but the welcome was even better. The transformation was complete. What had started as one man's quiet revenge had evolved into a movement that changed not just Chicago's restaurant scene, but the very concept of fine dining. Michael had shown that true power lies not in the ability to exclude others, but in the choice to include them. Local business schools began featuring the case study in their curriculum, analyzing how a single incident of discrimination had led to a complete disruption of an industry. Students studied how Michael had used his influence not just for personal gain, but to create lasting positive change. The story became a textbook example of how to transform conflict into opportunity. As 23 celebrated its first anniversary, Michael hosted a special dinner. The guest list included staff from all his restaurants, local community leaders, and even some former Golden Fork employees. Conspicuously absent were Gregory Phillips and Officer Reynolds, but their presence was felt in every aspect of what their actions had helped create. During the dinner, Michael finally addressed the incident publicly, though not in the way anyone expected. Instead of dwelling on the past, he spoke about the future. He announced an expansion of the Chicago Hospitality Initiative, including new partnerships with local schools and community organizations. The program would now offer not just training, but also startup funding for aspiring restaurateurs from underserved communities. The revenge, if it could still be called that, was complete. Michael had responded to an act of exclusion by creating a legacy of inclusion. He had taken a moment of disrespect and used it as foundation to build something that would outlast any personal vindication. In doing so, he had demonstrated a truth that went beyond basketball, beyond business, beyond even success or failure. True greatness lies not in how you treat those you think matter, but in how you treat everyone. What's your story of transforming a negative experience into positive change? Share in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories of justice served with style. Word of Chicago's restaurant revolution spread far beyond the city limits, catching the attention of industry leaders and cultural commentators across the nation. What had begun as a response to a single act of discrimination had evolved into a movement that was reshaping the landscape of American dining. As the story of Michael Jordan's innovative approach to revenge circulated, it sparked conversations about power, privilege, and the true meaning of hospitality. National food critics began making pilgrimages to Chicago, drawn by rumors of this new approach to fine dining. They came expecting to find just another celebrity-backed restaurant group, but what they discovered was something far more profound. Each establishment in Michael's growing empire told a story of transformation, not just in terms of cuisine, but in terms of human dignity. The impact was perhaps most visible in the lives of those who worked within the restaurant group. Maria Gonzalez, a former dishwasher at the Golden Fork who had been among those offered positions at 23, had risen to become a sous chef under Daniel Hayes's mentorship. Her story became emblematic of the opportunities the new system created, not through charity, but through recognition of talent and dedication. Even the physical landscape of Chicago's restaurant district had transformed. The formerly stuffy, intimidating atmosphere had given way to a vibrant, welcoming energy. Street artists were commissioned to create murals celebrating the city's diverse culinary heritage. The sidewalks were widened to accommodate outdoor seating, and the entire area took on the feeling of a grand, ongoing celebration of food and community. The contrast with the Golden Fork's legacy became increasingly stark. While Gregory Phillips struggled to maintain his new suburban restaurant's relevance, Michael's establishments consistently had waiting lists months long. But these weren't the exclusive reservations of old. The restaurants kept a significant portion of their seating for walk-in guests, ensuring that anyone could have the opportunity to experience fine dining without prejudice. The Chicago Hospitality Initiative had grown beyond its initial scope, partnering with local high schools to create culinary arts programs. Students who might never have considered careers in fine dining were now seeing possibilities they hadn't imagined before. The initiative's scholarship program had expanded to include not just culinary training, but also business education, ensuring that the next generation would have the tools to create their own success stories. Michael's influence began reaching into unexpected areas. Real estate developers in other cities started approaching him with proposals for similar restaurant districts. But he was selective about expansion, insisting that any new project maintain the core principles that had made Chicago's transformation successful: respect, inclusion, and opportunity for all. The media narrative around the story had evolved. As well, what had initially been reported as a simple tale of a celebrity taking revenge had deepened into a case study of systemic change. Business journals analyzed the financial success of the model, while social commentators noted how it was changing perceptions about fine dining and social status. 1 year and 8 months after the incident at the Golden Fork, Officer Reynolds's path crossed with Michael's again, this time under very different circumstances. Reynolds's teenage daughter, passionate about cooking, had applied to the Chicago Hospitality Initiative's youth program without knowing its connection to her father's past. When her acceptance letter arrived, Reynolds found himself facing a complex decision. After much internal struggle, Reynolds requested a meeting with Michael. It took place in 23's private dining room, early one morning before the restaurant opened. The conversation that unfolded would later be described by those who witnessed it as a masterclass in grace and redemption. Reynolds began with an apology, not just for the incident, but for what it represented. The casual abuse of authority, the rush to judgment based on appearances, the arrogance of assuming he could determine someone's worth by their clothes. Michael listened quietly, letting the man speak his piece. When Reynolds finished, Michael's response demonstrated why he was considered great, both on and off the basketball court. Instead of accepting or rejecting the apology, he offered Reynolds's daughter not just a place in the program, but a chance to intern at any restaurant in the group. "The past is the past," Michael said. "Let's focus on the future." This interaction sparked yet another evolution in the restaurant group's mission. Michael announced the creation of a new program specifically focused on training security personnel in hospitality and inclusion. The program would emphasize that true security came not from enforcing rigid rules, but from creating an environment where every guest felt valued and respected. The story reached its peak of public attention when a major business magazine featured it as their cover story, The Jordan Effect: How One Night of Discrimination Transformed an Industry. The article detailed not just the changes in Chicago's restaurant scene, but the broader implications for business leadership and social change. Statistics began emerging that quantified the impact. Employment in Chicago's restaurant industry had increased by 30%. The number of minority-owned restaurants in the city had doubled. Customer satisfaction scores across all fine dining establishments had improved, as other restaurants adopted similar inclusive policies to remain competitive. The Chicago Hospitality Initiative's first major success story came when one of its graduates, a former Golden Fork busboy, opened his own restaurant with backing from Michael's investment group. The establishment, a fusion of soul food and French cuisine, earned a Michelin star in its first year, a testament to how talent can flourish when given the right opportunities. Other celebrities and athletes began approaching Michael about partnering on similar initiatives in their own cities, but he maintained his measured approach, insisting that any expansion had to stay true to the core mission. It wasn't about creating a chain of restaurants. It was about changing how people thought about dining, hospitality, and human dignity. The transformation extended beyond the restaurant industry. Other luxury businesses began reconsidering their approach to exclusivity. High-end retailers, hotels, and clubs started shifting away from rigid dress codes and arbitrary restrictions, recognizing that true luxury could coexist with inclusivity. Gregory Phillips eventually sold his suburban restaurant and retired from the industry. In a rare interview, he admitted that his previous approach to fine dining had been fundamentally flawed. "We thought we were maintaining standards," he said, "but we were really just maintaining barriers. Michael Jordan showed us there was a better way." The story's impact continued to grow through social media, where videos of celebrities and ordinary people alike dining at 23 and its sister restaurants went viral. The sight of diverse groups enjoying fine dining together, dressed in everything from business suits to casual wear, became a powerful symbol of social change. The revenge that had begun with a single real estate deal had evolved into something far more significant, a movement that was changing not just how people dined, but how they thought about status, respect, and human dignity. Michael had created not just a successful business, but a template for how to transform discrimination into opportunity. As the second anniversary of 23 approached, Michael organized a special event that brought together staff from all his restaurants, graduates of the Chicago Hospitality Initiative, and community leaders. The evening celebrated not just the success of the restaurants, but the triumph of a different kind of revenge, one that lifted people up instead of tearing them down. Have you witnessed a moment of discrimination transform into an opportunity for positive change? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of justice served with style and grace. 3 years after the incident at the Golden Fork, Michael Jordan's restaurant revolution had become a case study in transformative leadership. But the true magnitude of its impact was only beginning to emerge. As summer turned to fall in Chicago, a new chapter in this remarkable story was about to unfold, one that would cement its place in hospitality industry history. The Harvard Business Review had dispatched a team to study the phenomenon, focusing not just on the financial success of the restaurants, but on the societal ripple effects. Their research revealed something extraordinary. Neighborhoods surrounding Michael's restaurants had experienced significant economic revival. Property values had increased, new businesses had opened, and crime rates had dropped. But the most compelling statistics came from employment data. The Chicago Hospitality Initiative had now graduated over 500 students, with an employment rate of 98%. More significantly, 60% of these graduates had advanced to management positions within their first 2 years. The program was creating not just jobs, but careers. The initiative's success had caught the attention of the Department of Labor, which was now studying it as a potential model for workforce development programs nationwide. What had begun as one man's response to discrimination had evolved into a blueprint for industry-wide transformation. One particularly notable success story emerged from an unexpected quarter. Officer Reynolds' daughter, who had entered the hospitality program 2 years earlier, had risen to become one of its star pupils. Her innovative approach to fusion cuisine, combining her grandmother's southern recipes with classical French techniques, had earned her a position as sous chef at 23. The irony of this development wasn't lost on anyone who knew the full story, but it perfectly exemplified the philosophy behind Michael's approach to revenge. Instead of perpetuating a cycle of negativity, he had created opportunities that transcended the original conflict, benefiting even the families of those who had once wronged him. The transformation of Chicago's dining scene had become so complete that few newcomers to the city could imagine it had ever been different. The rigid hierarchy and exclusivity that had once defined fine dining seemed like relics of a distant past. In their place was a vibrant, diverse culinary landscape that celebrated both excellence and accessibility. Michael's restaurant group had continued to expand, but always with purpose and precision. Each new establishment was carefully chosen to fill a specific niche or celebrate a particular cultural tradition. The group now included 15 restaurants, each with its own distinct identity, but united by the core principles of respect and inclusion. The latest addition to the family was particularly symbolic. Located in the same neighborhood where Michael had grown up, Home Court was a restaurant that celebrated American comfort food with an elevated twist. The chef, a graduate of the very first Chicago Hospitality Initiative class, had grown up in the same housing project as Michael. The restaurant's opening night was a celebration that brought together people from all walks of life. NBA legends dined alongside local community leaders, while families from the neighborhood enjoyed the same impeccable service as visiting celebrities. The evening stood as a testament to how far things had come from that night at the Golden Fork. But perhaps the most powerful validation of Michael's approach came from an unexpected source. A national survey of restaurant industry workers revealed that employees at his establishments reported the highest job satisfaction rates in the country. The study cited not just the competitive wages and benefits, but the culture of respect and opportunity that permeated every aspect of operations. The Chicago Hospitality Initiative had evolved as well. What had started as a simple training program now offered a comprehensive approach to career development. Participants received not just culinary and service training, but also education in business management, financial literacy, and leadership skills. The program had become a launching pad for the next generation of restaurant industry leaders. The initiative's impact extended beyond the restaurant industry. Other businesses began adopting its model of inclusive excellence, recognizing that removing arbitrary barriers to entry didn't mean lowering standards. It meant widening the pool of talent and opportunity. Even the physical landscape of Chicago continued to evolve. The restaurant district had become a tourist destination, not just for the food, but for the atmosphere of genuine hospitality that pervaded the area. Street festivals celebrating different culinary traditions became regular events, turning the neighborhood into a living testament to the power of food to bring people together. The media narrative around the story had evolved as well. What had once been reported as a tale of revenge was now being studied as a masterclass in transformative leadership. Business schools across the country included it in their curricula, using it to teach students about the power of responding to negativity with innovation and inclusion. Michael's approach to managing his restaurant empire reflected the same qualities that had made him a basketball legend: attention to detail, strategic thinking, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. But it was his ability to transform a personal slight into an opportunity for systemic change that truly set this venture apart. The restaurants themselves had become more than just places to eat. They were incubators for talent, gathering places for communities, and living proof that excellence and inclusion could coexist. Each establishment had its own personality, but all shared the same fundamental commitment to treating every guest with equal respect and dignity. The impact on Chicago's economy had been substantial. The restaurant group now employed over 2,000 people directly, with thousands more jobs created in supporting industries. But the real measure of success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the stories of individual lives transformed. Like the story of James Chen, a former dishwasher who had risen through the ranks to become a restaurant manager. Or Maria Rodriguez, who had started as a server and now owned her own catering business, backed by the restaurant group's investment arm. These success stories multiplied, creating a network of professionals who carried the principles of inclusive excellence into their own ventures. The original incident at the Golden Fork had faded into something of an urban legend, though its lessons remained powerful. Industry professionals now used it as a cautionary tale about the costs of exclusivity and the benefits of embracing diversity. The story had become part of Chicago's cultural fabric, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination is to create something better. As the 5th anniversary of 23 approached, Michael announced his most ambitious project yet. The restaurant group would establish a culinary institute, offering full scholarships to promising students from underserved communities. The institute would combine classical training with innovative approaches to cuisine, all while maintaining the principles of respect and inclusion that had become the group's hallmark. The announcement came with another piece of news that brought the story full circle. The institute would be located in the building that had once housed the Golden Fork. The space that had once been a symbol of exclusivity would become a center for culinary education and opportunity. Have you ever seen a negative experience become the catalyst for positive change? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of transformation and triumph. 5 years after that fateful night at the Golden Fork, the story of Michael Jordan's innovative revenge had become legend in the restaurant industry. But as the new Culinary Institute prepared to open its doors in the renovated building that had once symbolized exclusivity, even those who had followed the story from the beginning couldn't have predicted its final chapter. The transformation of the Golden Fork's former location into the Jordan Culinary Institute was more than just a symbolic victory. It represented the culmination of a vision that had reshaped an entire industry. The building's renovation preserved certain architectural elements while modernizing others, creating a space that honored the past while embracing the future. On the morning of the Institute's opening ceremony, a line of people stretched around the block. Among them were aspiring chefs, industry veterans, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness this newest chapter in the story. But the most powerful moments would come from some unexpected guests. Officer Reynolds was there, not as a security guard this time, but as a proud father. His daughter, now an accomplished sous chef, had been invited to be one of the Institute's first instructors. The man who had once tried to exclude Michael Jordan from a restaurant was now part of a legacy that would open doors for generations to come. Gregory Phillips, the former owner of the Golden Fork, had also received an invitation. His initial hesitation about attending was overcome by curiosity about what had become of his former establishment. As he walked through the doors, he found himself in a space that was at once familiar and completely transformed. The Institute's design reflected its mission. The ground floor housed a public restaurant where students could gain practical experience, while the upper floors contained state-of-the-art teaching kitchens, classrooms, and a research facility dedicated to culinary innovation. But it was the building's new facade that captured the transformation most dramatically, where the Golden Fork's entrance had once featured heavy wooden doors and frosted glass, designed to create an air of exclusivity. The Institute's entrance was crafted from clear glass and warm wood, creating an inviting atmosphere that drew people in. The message was clear. This was a place of learning, growth, and opportunity for all. Michael's speech at the opening ceremony encapsulated the journey from that night 5 years ago to the present moment. He spoke not about revenge or vindication, but about transformation and opportunity. What we're creating here, he said, is not just a school for cooking. It's a place where passion meets possibility, where talent meets opportunity, and where the only barrier to entry is the size of your dreams. The Institute's first class of students reflected this vision. Among them were former fast food workers, home cooks with no formal training, and young people from neighborhoods where fine dining had once seemed as distant as the moon. Each had been chosen not for their existing skills or connections, but for their passion and potential. The curriculum was as innovative as the Institute itself. Traditional culinary techniques were taught alongside business management, sustainable practices, and cultural studies. Students learned not just how to cook, but how to create and manage successful, inclusive restaurants of their own. The Institute's impact was immediate and far-reaching. Other culinary schools began revising their admissions policies and curricula, recognizing that the future of fine dining lay not in maintaining exclusive barriers, but in breaking them down. The very definition of what constituted fine dining was being rewritten. 1 year after the Institute's opening, its first graduating class stepped into the industry. Their success stories added new chapters to the legend. A former truck driver opened a fine dining establishment that celebrated the food of America's highways. A grandmother turned her family's traditional recipes into a successful restaurant chain. Each graduate carried forward the principles of excellence and inclusion that had sparked the revolution. The Institute became known for another innovation, its community outreach program. Regular cooking classes were offered to local residents, and the student restaurant operated on a sliding scale, ensuring that fine dining experiences were accessible to everyone. The building that had once been a symbol of exclusivity had become a community hub. The media coverage of the Institute's success brought renewed attention to the original story. Journalists who dug into the archives to recount the incident at the Golden Fork found themselves instead writing about the power of transformative leadership and the possibility of turning negative experiences into positive change. Michael's restaurant group had continued to grow, but with a new focus on mentoring and supporting independent restaurateurs. The group's investment arm provided startup funding to promising graduates, while its management team offered guidance and support. The goal was not to create a corporate empire, but to foster a network of successful, independent establishments. United by shared values, The impact extended beyond the culinary world. Business schools studied the model as an example of how to create sustainable social change through entrepreneurship. Social scientists examined how the transformation of the restaurant industry had affected broader patterns of social interaction and community development. The Institute's research facility became a hub for culinary innovation, exploring everything from sustainable cooking practices to the preservation of traditional recipes. But its most significant contribution was its work on creating inclusive dining environments that maintained high standards while welcoming all guests. Officer Reynolds, who had watched his daughter flourish as an instructor, became an unexpected advocate for the Institute's mission. He began speaking to police departments about the importance of addressing unconscious bias and the power of responding to mistakes with grace and growth, rather than shame and punishment. Gregory Phillips, too, found a role in the story's final chapter. After attending the opening ceremony, he approached Michael with an idea. He wanted to donate his collection of vintage wines and rare spirits to the Institute's training program. The gesture represented more than just a gift. It was an acknowledgement that the old way of doing things had given way to something better. The Institute's success sparked a wave of similar initiatives across the country. Other cities looked to replicate the model, recognizing that inclusive excellence in the culinary arts could drive economic development and social change. The revolution that had begun with one act of discrimination in Chicago was now spreading nationwide. As the Institute celebrated its second anniversary, Michael organized a special dinner that brought together key figures from every chapter of the story. The event was held in the Institute's restaurant, where students prepared and served a meal that celebrated the diversity of American cuisine. During the dinner, Michael raised a toast not to success or revenge, but to transformation. 5 years ago, he said, someone tried to tell me where I belonged. Today, we're creating places where everyone belongs. That's not just change, that's progress. The story of Michael Jordan's restaurant revolution had come full circle. What had begun as an act of quiet revenge had evolved into a movement that transformed not just an industry, but countless lives. The legacy would continue through each student who passed through the Institute's doors, carrying forward the principles of respect, inclusion, and excellence that had sparked the revolution. Have you ever been part of a transformation that started with a challenge and ended in positive change? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of innovation and progress that shape our world.